I've got all of our recoil starter parts cleaned up and ready for reassembly, and I went ahead and put a little bit of grease on some of the parts that rub against one another, like where the main spring goes in here on those raised sections, on the pivot shaft itself, then on the back side of the recoil pulley where the spring runs against that. Then also like the engagement dogs, the dog cover plate, and the actual decompressor cable puller. I cleaned all those up real good and just put a little light coating grease on just to keep them from rusting. Also same thing with the decompressor spring itself, just cleaned it up real good, real light coating grease on that. There again, you don't want to put a whole bunch on it. Now the recoil spring itself I have right here, I gave it the same treatment, just cleaned it up real good and then just put a little light coating of grease on that. Now this spring here is in good shape. The ends are both in good condition, so we're going to be able to reuse this one. If you put a new spring on, it will come pre-wound and it'll be wound up with a baling wire around it. So all you have to do is just drop it down into the body, clip the wire on it, and you're good to go. Now I'll show you how to safely compress that spring and put it in the housing. You got to be real careful with it because that spring, once you get it wound up tight enough to go down in there, it's going to have quite a bit of pressure on it. So you want to be real careful that you don't let that thing slip because it will hurt you. So let's get started putting this thing together. Okay, now I'm getting ready to wind the spring up, but before I do, I want to make sure that I've got it facing up the right direction because this spring has to wind in a certain direction or it's not going to work. And the way we determine that's pretty easy. Now here's the recoil housing right here, and obviously with the direction that you can see that the rope exits the housing at, that tells us that when you pull that rope's going to come out this direction, it's going to wind the pulley in a clockwise motion, okay? Also, you've got this hook on the back side of the pulley. So as it's turning clockwise, it engages into the spring. So that tells us that when we get ready to wind the spring up, that the inner portion of the spring needs to wind in a clockwise motion. And as you see here, we have this one upside down. So let's flip this spring over, just like that. Now that looks a lot better. Now we know that when we turn it in a clockwise motion, it's going to wind the spring. Okay. Now, for this next step, you want to be sure that you got you some good leather gloves. You want you some safety goggles, which I'm putting on right now. The only other thing you need is a pair of needle nose pliers. Now you want to have your main housing handy there because once we wind this thing up, we're going to hold it in place with a pair of needle nose and we're just going to set it right down into the case. Okay, so set that aside. Here we go. This is not very hard to do if you do it this way. All you have to do is just take your hand and place it right down on top of the center of the recoil starter spring. Grab the spring and just pull it. Keep your fingers over the end of it so it holds the whole assembly flat, just like that. Then you take your loose end, pass it back under, pull it tight, and keep your fingers over the end of it so it holds it in place. And you just keep winding. Now what you got to do is you got to get this spring assembly small enough to where it will fit inside the housing. So just keep pulling it around. Okay, I'm gonna go one more round here. I think we're gonna have it. Okay. Now, take your needle nose and just pinch it together just like that, and then very carefully pick it up. There you go. Now you got your spring wound. Now all you have to do is just set it down to the housing, set the hook right up against this little stop right here. Just like that, and then hold it down, then ease off of it with your needle nose and let that spring unwind itself into the body all the way. Just like that, nothing to it. Now, if you want to test it real quick to make sure you've got it in there correctly, just grab your pulley, just drop it down in there, and it should grab a hold of the spring as you turn it. Just like that, no problem. All right, now we're going to go ahead and continue to reassemble this thing, and I'll show you how to put the decompressor back together in it. Now we're going to install the rope and the pulley assembly. Now, I'm not going to reuse this old handle because it's all busted up, so it's not any good, so we're going to chunk that. I've got a brand new handle here. It's got a good boot and everything on it. And I also have a genuine Honda rope. Now you can get aftermarket recoil starter ropes for these things. I typically don't like to use them. If you go with the original Honda one, It's going to be the correct length, it's going to be the correct diameter, and I think it's just a little bit better quality of rope. Also, they treat it with a special oil that keeps the rope from drying out and getting stiff so that the recoil starter returns real good. So what we want to do is we're going to start out with putting our rope into the handle. Just kind of run it up through there. Pull it on through. We're going to tie a knot in the end of the rope, and what I like to do is just make you 2 passes over, 1 pass through, just like that right there. And try to get the knot as close to the end as you can. Now next what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in and clamp it down in the vise, and then pull on this rope real hard so it pulls that knot up good and tight. There you go. You can see we got that knot good and tight on there. So next, we'll just set the knot down into the handle. Just like that. Then I've even got the little plastic cap that covers up the opening and end of the handle so you didn't have water running down the rope and eventually working its way into the starter. Alright, there we go. Got her sealed up real good there. Now, we'll set that handle down. Then we'll run it through the rope starter housing. Then we're going to run it through the hole in the pulley. Just like that. Then you want to do the same thing. You just want to tie a knot in the end of it, and the knot I use, just pass it over twice, then back through the hole. That's better than just using a regular square knot. But there again, try to get it as close to the end as you can, just like that. Then we'll put this end in the vise, pull on it real hard, and cinch it down. There you go, just like that. Okay. So next what we'll do is we'll pull the end of the rope all the way into the pulley housing, just like that. Next, we'll go ahead and I'm going to wind the rope around the pulley. Leave yourself about a foot, foot and a half left over. Then I'm going to just drop the pulley right down into the housing. There you go. Make sure it engages the spring. Just like that. Now, what I'm going to do temporarily, we're going to wind this spring up and get it preset, but I don't want this pulley floating up to where it can come off the end of the spring. So what I'm going to do temporarily is I'm going to drop one of the copper washers down on there, and the spring and the other copper washer. And I'm going to temporarily install the circlip, just enough to kind of keep that thing from riding up like that. That way I know it's going to be safe. Now, what we need to do next is we need to wind and preload the spring. Now on that pulley, there is a little notch in it. Bring it up here where you can see it. There's a little notch in that pulley right there. Yeah, see that notch? And what that's for, that's a little groove that you can pass the rope up into so that you can wind the rope around this thing and get the proper amount of preload on the spring. So all we got to do is reach in here and grab a rope, pull you up enough of it there where you got something to work with, and then wind that pulley around until you can get that rope right in that notch, just like that. Then you just take your rope and you wind your pulley. Now you're going to have to kind of experiment with this because you want to get enough tension on it to overcome the friction of the recoil starter and the decompressor unit. So just because you've got enough tension on this rope to where it pulls the rope in, that may not necessarily be enough tension to pull it in once you put all this decompressor assembly in here. So I've got, that's probably taken a good pound of pull or better to do that. So I think this is going to be pretty sufficient here. That's returning real good. So we're going to work with this. Now, the only bad thing about it is if you put all this back together and then you find out that you didn't have enough preload on it to where it actually pulls the rope in good and tight, you're going to have to go back and remove the entire decompressor again, get it down to this part here and then get you another wind or two on it. So just kind of experiment with it. You may have to mess with it a few times, but it's no big deal. All right, now we've got our rope and our spring pre-wound like we want it. I'm gonna go ahead and remove these pieces again. We'll go ahead and leave that copper washer down in there because that's where it's gonna go. Next, we're gonna put in the engagement dogs. And then you've got your 3 little hairsprings. Now, one thing you need to be sure that you inspect these springs for before you put them back in is they've got a little bitty hook on the end of them, as you can see there. Make sure that hook is intact on both ends. If that little hook's in there, it's not going to pull those dogs back in, and they can actually float out and contact the engagement ring on the flywheel. So you want to put your springs in there with the hooks going into the little holes in the dogs, and then the little loop runs up. All 3 of them go in the same way, just like that. Okay. Next, you want to put your spring back on. Then you got your little cover plate. Just line up the dogs with these little openings here, just like that. Then mash the cover down. Put on your second copper washer. Then your circlip. Then just take your pair of pliers and make sure you get that circlip. You engage it all the way, just like that. Then you might want to test it again. Yep. Make sure that your dog's fully engaged in that cover and it actually pulls them out. Get you a little closer look there. Yeah, see how those dogs are coming out of there? That's what grabs a hold of the reel on the flywheel and turns the motor on. Okay, now we're getting on to the home stretch here. Now we're going to get ready to reassemble the decompressor itself. Now before I do it, there's one last thing I want to do here. This is our decompressor cable. Now this one's in good shape. The ends of the cables are good and it's pretty free, but I'm going to go ahead and do one last thing. I always like to lubricate my cables. And this is a little device. If you guys have watched my videos in the past, you've seen this little gadget before. This is my cable luber. You just clamp it right on the end of your cable there. Tighten down the little thumb screw on it. That seals off the end of that cable. Then I'm going to take me some lubricant here. There's a little port right here on the cable luber. Put your little stem in the end of it. You just give it a squirt. That's forcing lubrication through that cable and out the other end. Just like that, you can see it coming through there. And that'll certainly free up that cable, and it'll also take a lot of excess drag off of your decompressor system and makes it work a lot better. Oh yeah, that cable's good free there. Okay, now